So Bethesda announced that we are getting a patch in the very near future for Legends, and with the patch is coming some balance changes. So for this video, I'm just going to talk about the changes and what the potential impact of said changes are. So we're just going to dive right into it. First up, should come as no shock to anybody, Talia's conscription is going to get adjusted. Whether or not this card was okay in terms of power level, it kind of doesn't matter. It was not a popular card amongst the masses. I mean, it was very, very popular, which is why it was also unpopular. The card itself saw a ton of play, and as such, also pissed a lot of people off. So Talia's conscription is moving from 11 magicka to 12 magicka. Now, what does this mean? By itself, not a lot, if I'm being 100% honest. You weren't really trying to play this on curve unless you were trying to race another control deck. Typically, this is the kind of card that you played after you've already established control, and you're looking to do one of two things. Either generate enough pressure so that you can close a game out, or just thin your deck and draw anywhere between like 3 and 5 more cards so that you can hunt for your Journey to Sovngarde and then play that and then play Conscription. So moving it to 12, it might matter in like 5 out of 100 games, right? This might impact like 5% of the games that you would have normally played with Conscription, but hey, it got adjusted, right? So maybe this will be enough to spook people away from playing this, but I don't think that's going to be the case personally. I think that this does nothing to actual conscription decks on its own right now in the current meta. All right. Genius Path Mage. This one I'm honestly not that surprised by. I've been saying for a while that Genius Path Mage is one of, if not just outright my favorite cards in the game. And the reason is because it has so many cool interactions and it has such great combo potential. But I've been worried about it for a while because it has a really high ceiling for power level. The fact that it was a tutor that you could run 3 of, and whatever you tutored for left magicka left over for you to play more, is the reason that it was played in so many pretty broken combo decks. Now, what does this change actually do? Well, it hurts the just value engine decks a little bit more than the straight combo decks, in my opinion. So there were some versions of like Tribunal Control that ran a Necromancer and Path Mage package, if you will, and as a result, this requiring a little more magicka coming online a little bit later means you can't directly tutor for some of those value engine plays as much. And, it'll affect those ones pretty significantly. But for Nixox, it doesn't necessarily change a lot. And here's why. Before, you needed exactly 13 magicka to pull the combo off because you would play Path Mage to find a Nixox. Nixox was the only 7-drop in your deck. And if you played Path Mage when you had 13, you had 7 magicka left over. That guaranteed you found Nixox. And then you would just go off with a Dark Rebirth. Dark Rebirth on your Path Mage would then fetch you Laneth, right? That was your go-to play. Now, if Path Mage costs 7, there's another 7-drop in your deck, right? In theory, that should kind of interrupt the flow of that combo, but really all it does is push it back a turn, because what happens instead is you play Path Mage and it either finds a Nixox or it finds another Path Mage, and then that Path Mage finds a Nixox or another Path Mage, and then if it finds another Path Mage, then that one's for sure going to find a Nixox because you'll still have no other 7-drops in the deck. So at that point, Path Mage will find you your Nixox. Nixox will, again, if you're at 14 magicka instead of 13 magicka, you'll still have the same amount left over, which will be 7, and that'll take you to 12 still. And the Dark Rebirth on the Path Mage, because it's Dark Rebirth and not casting it, will still have 0 impact. You'll still find Laneth. So all it really does in essence, is make you need 14 magicka instead of 13. Is that enough to slow down Nixax? I don't know. I still think that ultimately in a perfect world where things are piloted properly, if there's a lot of control being played, Nixax is probably still going to be the apex predator of control decks, because its win condition comes online in a more consistent fashion than conscription. Especially now that conscription, 1, got nerfed to 12, but 2, 1 conscription isn't usually enough to finish off a Nixax opponent. Usually you're waiting for either a second or a post-journey conscription. So I think Nixax is still like the deck that will feast on other control decks. And yeah, that's that. So next up, this one hurts me. This one hurts me more than anything. Somebody who's been playing since closed beta and open beta and all of the betas and blah, blah, blah. Goblin Skulk is getting adjusted. It's going from 2 magicka to 3, and it's becoming a 2/3. Now, the 2/3 helps it in terms of survivability. The 3 cost is pretty rough. And the reason it's rough is because it definitely hurts aggressive decks. So, for example, the dreams start with like Halalu used to be ring Goblin Skulk. If they don't have an answer, Skulk swings, you get a Nord Firebrand. Now you have a green creature and a red creature. You can play Oathman Chains into whatever you want, right? This delays it. And paying 2 for a 2/2 body with upside was okay. Paying 3 for a 2/3 body without immediate value and just upside is probably not enough. Your executes and your Grizzly Gourmets will still punish this incredibly hard. And I mean, really, you have to start comparing like this card in aggressive decks anyway to something like Oculatus Agent, where you're still paying 3 for a 2/3, but you get immediate value out of your utility, where with Skulk now, you play it, it does nothing, it's still only attacking for 2. You know, that's paying 2 for the 2/2 body was one thing. Paying 3 for a 2/3 when I could be paying 3 for, you know, a Clan Sorcerer or a Mammoth or something else that swings for 4 or 5 if it's a pit line, right? Like, for an aggressive deck, the disparity I think is too high. Control decks, I honestly don't think really care. So Telvanni decks that ran Cruel Firebloom were running Skulk, and the only thing that this does for that deck is make it so that you don't get Firebloom as uncontested, and you have 1 less 2-drop for your conscriptions. Skulk wasn't really a big deal, but the fact that it was a 2-drop, if you were running it, just meant, again, your conscriptions thinned your deck to find your other pieces. That's really about it. So like, if you really still want to run Cruel Fireblooms and Skulks, you can do so. To be honest, I think you could probably still run Cruel Firebloom anyway and just drop the Skulks and maybe replace it with other 2-drops or better 3-drops. I'm not saying you need to do that. I think Skulk was probably still fine in something like Telvanni, but you don't have to run it now. And the big decks that get hurt by this, and this is I think why I'm so upset, because this kind of keeps happening, are some of the cool and cheeky fun combo decks. So Market Archer. Market Archer is one of those decks that by itself has just never been like a tier 1 deck, but it's always been a lot of fun to play. But it's using cards from other decks that have been very good, and so it keeps getting nerfed by association. Northwind Outpost, that nerf obviously hurt it. Now this Goblin Skulk thing certainly hurts it. Goblin Skulk at 3 is a big blow to Market Archer, because Outpost now costs 3 and Market costs 3, and you have all these other things that you'd prefer to play, you know, in increments of 3, and it's just not likely to survive. It just hurts me inside. So yeah, I do think that the decks that are most affected by the Goblin Skulk nerf are probably Halalu and probably like Tempo Assassin. Those are going to be, I think, the 2 that miss it the most, but Market Archer makes me so sad. Ash Berserker. This is huge. Ash Berserker is going from a 4-3 to a 3-3. Now, the reason this is huge is because there are a lot of ways to buff Ash Berserker's attack by 1, and not nearly as many ways to buff it by 2, which means you need another creature on the board to probably activate it. Like before, if you had a 5th Legion trainer or Clan Captain, Divine Fervor, your Crown Quartermaster to put a dagger in your hand, like again, the number of ways to trigger it were pretty endless. Now you're going to be relying on another creature. Now the good news is a lot of those decks, there's still ways you can trigger it because you have a lot of creatures that typically have 4 attack that aren't Ash Berserker. So you can still do it with all of those +1 effects and then just something else. But it requires you to have an additional card invested because you can't just play Ash Berserker into like whatever was buffing it, which was pretty powerful before. Yeah, this one is going to be felt again. Halalu feels this. I think non-catapult warrior decks feel this. My Mid Daggeth list that I run a lot probably feels this. I actually think Mid Daggeth might be best equipped to handle this along with like Mid Battle Mage, just because they already have a lot of other big creatures that had 5 attack anyway. In my Daggeth list, for example, runs Seydanine, which makes it very, very easy to get creatures up to 5 attack or more. So less impacted, but this will be felt. This will be huge. There's also buffs. So we're going to go over the buffs now. Temple Patriarch was a 7-cost 5/5 that triggered Exalt of friendly creatures. Now it's a 6-cost 5/5. Respectable. More likely to be playable. I think that you'll actually feel this more in Arena than anything because I don't think the quality of Exalt creatures, even after we go through the buffs down below, I don't think the quality of Exalt creatures is going to be enough to make it worth running this in Constructed, even still, if I'm being entirely honest. But this is a change that you will probably feel in Arena if you're picking Tribunal. Next up, Enamor's Keeper. Essentially, the Exalt cost went down by 1. So now, instead of paying 8, you can pay 7, and this is reasonable. This is the kind of change where, because of the way the curve works out, you could probably get away with running an Enamor's Keeper in something like Mid Daggeth or like Mid Sorcerer and not feel as bad about it. Like if you don't like Clan Sorcerer, for example, you could use an Enamor's Keeper instead, or maybe do a mix and match. In Mid Daggeth, again, getting a Greatsword isn't half bad, and it'll let you trigger a lot of your Daggeth effects if you have the Greatsword equipped. Mid Daggeth especially, other than like Belligerent Giant, doesn't run a lot in the 7 slot, so playing this on curve isn't terrible, and then if you play it on curve with the Exalt, also probably not ruining too much for you unless you're trying to play more than one card. At 7, I usually find myself playing like a 3 and a 4 or a 2 and a 5 far more often than just like Belligerent Giant, but an Enamor's Keeper could open that up a bit if you wanted to run it. And yeah, Sorcerer, you're really looking at like Worm King's Agent if you run it, or the most popular choice as of right now has been Moose, right? Wild Incarnate. Outside of that, there's not a lot of just like 7 drops. And so this would be potentially reasonable. Of the buffs, I think this is probably the most significant and will probably affect play rates the most. But again, not good enough that I would say like start running Temple Patriarch, but this by itself might be enough to make this see play. And then the last buff is again one that I think will be felt far more in Arena than Constructed, but Temple Conjurer is also had its Exalt reduced by 1. So it's still a 2/2 for 2, still summons a Flame Atronach, but now you can do so at a cost of 5. So you can get a 2/2 for 2, or for an investment of 5, you get a 7 5s worth of stats spread across the 2 creatures. Very, very good in Arena. In theory, because a lot of like blue-based mid-range decks in the past, they struggled with 5 drops. There was a reason Thief of Dreams was as popular as it was, and some of the other decks were like thirsting for quality 5 drops, but those days have long since passed, and it's not nearly as much of a need, so I don't think you need to start running this as like a pseudo 5 drop by any means. Again, the lack of like immediate board impact probably hurts this card the most, but matters a lot less in Arena. And I think that, again, this change and this change will likely be felt in Arena the most. So now that we've seen all of the changes, I want to talk a bit about what I think this means for the meta overall, and who I think like some of the winners and losers are. So in my opinion, Telvanni had some cards, like, depending on the deck you play, adjusted, but I think Telvanni came out pretty unscathed in the grand scheme of things. Again, in my opinion, moving conscription from 11 to 12 does not really hurt its game plan that often. The number of times you were playing conscription exactly on 11 and you didn't already have control of the game and you were just hoping that that saved you somehow, they were pretty rare. So waiting another turn, probably not that big of a deal. You were never like playing conscription and then like another 1 drop or like a 2 drop if you'd ramped or something, so that you're not going to be interrupting any weird combos. It just is, you know, a late game bomb play that helps you close out games, and that's what it was before, and that's what it'll be now. It'll still thin out your deck. It'll still be fine with Journey. All of the things it did before, in my opinion, it still does now. So if you play conscription, you're not worried. Again, Nixox, you just had your combo delayed by a turn. That's it. That's like literally it. So Telvanni goes unscathed there, whereas if you ran like the Value Engine Tribunal decks, this pretty much hurts. If you ran like Jarl or Unite, this also hurts. So yeah, that's a bit of a problem. All right, Skulk and Ash Berserker definitely hurt Hlaalu. Both of these cards were staples. Ash Berserker also, again, unless you're running Catapult Warrior, I think hurts other strength-based aggressive decks. Maybe not mid-BM as much, but some of the other ones, like I said, my mid-Dagoth, time will tell. But yeah, Berserker hurts, Skulk hurts. If Hlaalu still ends up seeing play, and I think that it will, it just won't have the crazy, insane openers it used to have, but I think it'll still see play. I think that a lot of Hlaalu decks will take a long, hard look at maybe going back on Ash Berserker and instead revisiting Ulfric's Housecarl. Because if you're going to pay 4 for a 3/3 anyway, and your 4-cost 3/3 is going to draw you cards, I think Housecarl just has more upside, right? And will likely replace, at least in either Crusader or Hlaalu aggro variants, Ash Berserker. So Ulfric's Housecarl by proxy might have got like a mini buff in this patch. And yeah, again, maybe a couple of decks try sneaking in some Enamour's Keepers as like 1 or 2 ofs. You might run 3, like I said, if you just really don't like Clan Sorcerer in certain decks, but for the most part, this is good enough to maybe consider including now. It's not going to make a huge splash, in my opinion. I don't think you're going to see this all over the ladder, but you might see it more often, which is nice. I don't think the other buffs are going to matter much. Yeah, I think that the combination of Skulk and Ash Berserker hurt Hlaalu a lot more than these nerfs hurt Telvanni. And I think that for the first week or so, you might see some people trying out some new combinations just because that's usually pretty standard after a round of nerfs. People say, hey, this isn't as good as it used to be. Let's try something new. But I think that, if I'm being honest, I think that people are going to just end up going back to Conscription Telvanni that were playing it before, because I don't think that it has been net hit hard enough yet. When we get a new set, right? When Isles comes out, Isle of Madness, maybe things change. And I hope that they do. But right now, Mid-range still looking pretty okay. Other potential winners, right? So like if you played mid Telvanni before, it might be a great time to play it because you weren't worried about Ash Berserker anyway. Some versions ran skulk, some didn't. If you were a skulkless version, then you're perfectly fine there. So maybe mid Telvanni makes a bit of an uptick. Tempo Assassin gets hurt by the skulk nerf, in my opinion. Yeah. So I want to know what you guys think. Again, this is just my prediction, but I feel like Telvanni is still going to be really strong. I think some of the other more mid-rangey decks are likely to be as strong. I also wouldn't be shocked if we see an increase in like Token Crusader, since again, Token Crusader can run House Carl instead of this, doesn't worry about the Skulk nerf. So if you're looking for an aggressive deck that might still have a insane opener potential sort of thing, maybe Token Crusader makes a bit of a comeback. But yeah, let me know what you think. I want to know if you think that these balance changes are enough, or if you think that they're not enough, or if you want to see something else. It's going to be interesting. Now, as a bit of a teaser, as a bit of a spoiler at the very end here, I do want to say these are just the balance changes. These aren't the full patch notes, so keep an eye out for those patch notes. There's some exciting stuff coming. I won't say anything else, but exciting stuff. And yeah, that's it. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Until next time, may you walk on warm sands.